Weekend Japanology was a studio-based show, but there are things which people just always avoid on Japanese television. They would give me a script, and there would be things in the script. I said, this is borderline nationalism. If you want to come across to a Western audience with any kind of authenticity, you've got to be honest with them. And let's face it, the mainstream media may not be the mainstream for very long now.
Hey there, and thank you for tuning in. We're excited to bring you another great conversation today. If you like the show and want to support us, please hit the subscribe button so we can keep bringing you great content week after week. And if you're feeling extra generous, give this video a like and share your thoughts and comments down below. Thank you so much. And now, let's get into it. Welcome to Unpacking Japan. I'm Toby, and today we welcome Peter Barakan. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
You've been a broadcaster here in Japan for a few decades already.
I started working in radio in 1980, so yeah, as of this year, it's 45 years.
And we're looking forward to hear your experience and your journey, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, started in 1974 when you came to Japan to work for Shinko Music.
That's right. So I celebrated my 50th anniversary last summer.
I'm curious, if we go back a little bit further, what kind of started your interest in Japan in the first place?
This is a question that I always get asked, and I've never had a good answer for it. I studied Japanese in university. I was born and brought up in London. I went to the School of Oriental and African Studies, SOAS, at London University. When I was in my last year in high school, I didn't know whether I really wanted to study anything after school. But I did know that I didn't want to go out to work at the age of 18. So I thought, since at the time it was free to go to university in England, I'd give it a try. On the other hand, I didn't know what I wanted to study. So it became an issue having to pin that down. What I did enjoy in school was languages. I'd done ancient Greek and Latin for 7 years.
Wow.
I'd done 2 years of French only in middle school. I did an optional 2 years of Russian in high school. I think I was probably attracted to languages that weren't necessarily the ones you would immediately think of. So I thought, okay, let's see what would be a good language to study. And it became a question of weeding out the ones that I wasn't interested in. And what was left was Japanese. It's kind of a short way of putting it.
That's interesting because there's a lot of languages to weed out, and then you ended up with Japanese.
Yeah.
So you studied this at SOAS and kind of got into the language. Were you thinking already then, okay, I might move to Japan, I will try to actually go there? Or were you just, okay, I need to study something, I'm studying Japanese for the sake of studying Japanese because it's interesting?
Yes. I mean, I didn't even know if it was going to be interesting when I got in there. It was a lot more complicated and a lot more difficult than I had been imagining, I think. But it was fun. That was fine. I was used, I'd done ancient Greek and stuff. So I was expecting a little difficulty. It was hard work, but I enjoyed it. On the other hand, it was constant hard work for 4 years, or the best part of 4 years, learning 50 kanji every week and being tested on them every week. Not just the ones you learned that week, but from
the previous weeks as well.
Yeah. So by the time I got my degree, I thought, okay, if I never see another kanji for the rest of my life, I think I'll be fine. So I got out of college, had my last long summer holiday, and got back to London. Okay, I need to find a job. And I'd always been a music freak. I grew up with the Beatles and that whole generation of music, so I'm not the only one. But perhaps I was more of a music freak than most of my other friends. So I thought, okay, whatever job I'm going to get, it needs to be related to music in some way. So I went out and I bought the evening paper, which was this big, thick thing, and the back half of it was always want ads. So I'm leafing through those, and there was a record shop advertising somebody to come and work there. I thought, okay, that'll do for a start. So I call them up, go for an interview. Immediately they say, yes, can you come, next week? Yes, sure. So I started working there in the autumn of 1973, right through till the summer of the next year, by which time I could feel the limitations of it. It wasn't going anywhere really. If I wanted to make a future out of it, I'd have to own my own shop. And at what I was getting paid, that was never going to happen.
You can't save up enough for a shop by working just...
No. So I was starting to get a little bit antsy, wanting to find a new job. And we would get the trade paper, Music Week, in the shop every week. And right inside the back cover of the magazine, there were always want ads for music-related jobs. And one week, one of the guys I was working with was looking at it, and he said, hey, they're asking for you. And it was a Japanese music publishing company, Shinko Music, had put an ad in Music Week saying a young Englishman wanted to work in Tokyo, 2 to 3 years, enthusiasm more important than experience. I think it said something like that.
Wow.
And I thought, you never know. It might be interesting. So they left. There was a London address in the ad for a company they're working with. So I sent a letter off to them. They came for a business trip to London, and I had an interview. They were a little bit non-committal. And after that, about a month or so went by. And I thought I hadn't got it. I thought, okay, never mind, I'll look for something else. And then suddenly, out of the blue, they called. I was renting a room in a house at the time. And my room happened to be the closest to the front door. And there was a public phone right inside the door. And the phone rang, which was really unusual. It's a public phone. Just as I was about to go out to work one day. So it was right outside my door. So I picked up the phone and they said, "Is Peter Barakan there?" I said, "Yes, that's me." They said, "We're calling from Tokyo. Can you be here in 10 days?
Oh, wow.
I must have forgotten that I'd given them the phone number.
This is calling the public phone, and that's outside of the house, right? And
it's inside the house, but just inside the front door, there's a hall, and everybody had separate rooms, each with their own locked door.
Lucky that you were there at the time they called.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah. If I hadn't been there, I probably wouldn't be here now.
So how did it work back then? They give you this call and they tell you have to be in Tokyo in 10 days.
Yep.
But you still need to get a visa, I assume, and kind of get papers sorted. And
the original trip was on a tourist visa. They had me come for a month just to see how it would go, a trial period. So they sent me a round-trip air ticket on Aeroflot the first time because it was cheaper than any other
through
airline.
Moscow?
Through Moscow, yes. Which at the time was before they rebuilt Sheremetyevo. It was light gray inside the terminal, and they had communist leaflets in 5 or 6 languages, perhaps.
I mean, that's 1974, right? So it's like still right in the middle of the USSR.
Oh, yeah. It was very drab, and luckily I wasn't there for very long. So anyway, I arrive in Tokyo on that flight, and I'm there for a month. I get acquainted with the work. I want to stay. They want me to stay. So now they have to get me a working visa, which means I have to leave Japan, go back to London, and I must have spent about a month and a half in London waiting for the visa to come through. And I came back in September of that year, and I've been here ever since.
This was your first trip to Japan. How was it like stepping into Tokyo in the mid-70s?
A lot different from now. There were much, much less foreigners around. It was a lot more Asian feeling. It's much more cosmopolitan now. Of course, it was cosmopolitan compared with a lot of other places, I'm sure, then as well. But I remember it must have been probably the second day I was here. I got on a tube train, underground train. And it was in the middle of the day, so it wasn't particularly crowded. But pretty much all of the seats were full. And I was standing at one end of the car, I guess, and looking down the car. And on both sides, everybody had black hair. And that was the first time in my life that I'd ever seen that. And it was that moment that I realized that I'd really stepped into a totally different culture. Because even in 1974, London was pretty multicultural, or not as much as now, but even so, a lot more than Tokyo was. So that was just one moment in the day, but it was kind of a wake-up call in a way. Okay, you've come to somewhere completely different. Get used to this.
At the time, no internet yet. You can't just
No.
take out your smartphone and translate with Google Translate. You had studied for 4 years Japanese.
Yeah.
How was it like language-wise when you arrived there and you kind of started talking with the officials from the company, the managers, and working with them?
The reason they hired me was because they had contracts with a lot of foreign companies. And as you say, there wasn't any internet, there was no email or anything. There were loads and loads of business letters written every day between Japan and mainly UK, US, some European countries. And they needed someone who could write letters in perfect English. And that was basically the reason that they'd employed me. They were lucky in a way in that I had a fairly broad knowledge of popular music just because I was a fan. And that definitely stood me well in the job as well. But because they'd hired somebody to work in English, basically, people were willing to try and accommodate me by speaking to me in English. On the other hand, the vast majority of people in the company didn't speak much, if any, English. So I had to get by in Japanese very, very quickly. Interestingly, before me, they'd had a young American guy doing the same thing. He'd come without any knowledge of Japanese at all and had left after about 6 months with pretty much a nervous breakdown. He just couldn't handle it. So it was just as well that I had done that degree. Otherwise, I don't think I would have been able to stick around.
The 70s were kind of like the boom of Japan. All the eyes, the media's attention was on Japan.
Not yet. When I first entered SOAS in 1969, I remember my father's relations thinking that I was a bit eccentric for studying Japanese. When I graduated 4 years later, they were starting to say, oh, maybe he knew something that we didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But it was still at that point. People were starting to have an interest in Japan, but it wasn't the really strong interest that you started to see from the 1980s onwards, I think.
So the 80s were like the peak of this industrial development here, and where all the car manufacturers, electronic manufacturers really established themselves.
Right.
So how was it like just before in terms of the work culture? Was it also this stereotypical overtime and the nomikais after work every single day?
Yep, pretty much. I don't know about every single day. It wasn't a typical Japanese company in that way. It was a music company. So there were a lot of young people. You didn't have to wear a suit to work. Everybody wore jeans and T-shirts or whatever. You could just be very casual. People did stay late after work. There was definitely a culture of, if your boss is still in the office, then it's not cool to leave until he does. For me, because I was a foreigner, I didn't give it a second thought. They had time cards. So if you'd clock in at 10 o'clock.
Paper time cards.
Yeah, there was a machine just catching, you clock in at 10, and at 6 o'clock, you were able to leave anytime you want, anytime after 6. And I would leave pretty much right after 6 because I had the work I had to do. I was pretty efficient. I would generally get it done within that time. So unless there was any pressing reason why I had to be in the office, I'd be out. Not that I had anything to do in the evenings. I was renting a very small, cheap room in the suburbs, and I would just go back and listen to my records, and that was about it.
So you were kind of lost and were not sure what you wanted to do career-wise. Suddenly you arrive in Japan and you're writing these letters in English for this music company. Mm. Did you start thinking about, okay, I'm here in Japan now. This is kind of pretty unique. And what am I going to do here?
Not for a while. Everything was so new and it was so different. And the nature of the work was new as well. Of course, I had to learn a lot. And then just getting to terms with Japanese society as well. You just experiencing all these new things every day. So the first year kind of went by in a blur.
What were some of these early challenges that you kind of remember experiencing that you had to process for a while before you got used to it?
Trying to earn people's trust, perhaps. For a lot of the people I was working with in the office, I was the first non-Japanese that they dealt with. And my way of expressing myself would be different. I'd be much more straight up. If I was thinking something, I'd just say what I was thinking. I've heard some English speakers say that Osaka is an easier place to live than Tokyo, because Osaka people tend to be that way too. I never experienced Osaka in my early days here. So in Tokyo, very often people don't necessarily say what they're thinking. So I had to get used to that, and they had to get used to me being the way I am. And fairly soon, because my Japanese skills were reasonably okay, I mean, I could read and write. My speaking wasn't that great when I first got here, but I could make myself understood. And within a couple of months, probably, people realized that I was somebody they could trust, and we became friendly. We'd go out drinking in the evenings and whatever.
You said it's your 50th anniversary with the company?
Not with the company, my 50th anniversary in Japan.
In Japan.
Yeah, last year, yeah.
Are you still in touch with some of the people from these early days?
Not really. I worked there for 6 years. I got very frustrated around halfway through. My third year or so, there were a couple of things that showed me that, for a start, music publishers really don't have very much power in the music industry. So I was always incredibly enthusiastic about music itself. And if I found something I really liked, I always wanted to turn other people onto it. And when you're working in the industry, you want to try and, for example, I'll give you a specific example. You know Tom Petty?
No.
No. Okay. He died a few years ago. American rock musician. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. They came along in 1976. It had so happened that we controlled the publishing on the songs on their album. And as soon as I heard this album, I thought, wow, this guy is going to be really big. This is just great. And the record company, I got in touch with the record company, said, what kind of promotion you're going to do? And said, well, we'll put it out, but we're not really going to promote it because he doesn't really have the kind of looks that teenage girls are going to like. And I was just knocked for six by this. I go, what? You know, the music is so great and you're not going to do anything with this? And when I was told that, I thought, okay, if the record company's not going to get behind this is not going to go anywhere. And in fact, his group eventually became big worldwide, but in Japan it was very limited. But to me, that was a strong message that being in a music publishing company, if you really want to accomplish something, forget it, it's not going to happen. So I think my enthusiasm for the work started to wane a little bit after that. And a couple of other things happened as well. I got asked to write record reviews for a magazine that was published by a rival company.
Really? Okay.
And I didn't really think about it. They said, would you write a review for our magazine? And I said, yeah, okay, sure. And I wrote it under my real name. And then after it was published, I thought, maybe I should have mentioned something to the company. So I went to the boss. I said, look, this is what happened. And he kind of bawled me out.
And so after a few years, you start thinking like, well, it's been 3-4 years. I'll do a couple more, but maybe I should start exploring something
Gradually, it kind of got like that. And they too thought, it was time for me to move on. So that was what happened, yeah.
You described yourself as a music freak from a young age where you just loved listening and discovering records. Now you moved to Japan. Did you discover a lot of the music from that period as well and kind of found something new that you hadn't really heard before?
I was listening to all kinds of music, but mainly not Japanese music. My work was related with Western music. all of the contracts that the company had were with companies abroad. So the music that I was dealing with professionally was Western music. And because I'd grown up with Western music, that was what I liked. So at the time in the 1970s, if you switched on the TV in the evening, there were music programs on several channels, probably every evening, much, much more than now. But it was all Japanese kayokyoku, the usual stuff that was, popular with the masses, which is what you're going to find in any country, I suppose. So because I would watch TV, I knew what the hit songs were, but they never really interested me, with maybe a few exceptions. So yes, I did discover loads of great music all the time, but a lot of it was because I was involved professionally. Also, I mean, most of the friends that I had in the company were all music freaks as well. So everybody was buying records, and we'd all play each other our records. And that was how our lives went,
Records went away for a while, but now it seems like they're making a comeback, and more and more people. I got a record player myself a couple of years ago, and I enjoy going to the store and flipping through what they have and picking up a new one once in a while.
Well, this is the period before CDs. So in the 1970s, you only had records, and there were lots of record shops too, and there were good shops in Tokyo which imported stuff directly from the US and Europe. So you had, especially in the 1980s. Practically an unlimited choice of records to buy. And in fact, Tokyo probably became the record buying capital of the world at one point.
It's still probably one of the most popular spots today, I would say.
Might well be, yeah.
1980, you leave that company.
Yep.
And you start moving into broadcasting, right? And
I'd started doing a radio program about 6 months before I left the company. In fact, that was one more reason why they kind of...
Basically, if you start doing things on the side, it's not really welcome. And
right. They said this company is a bit like a family, and it's not right for one of the family to become, the one that sticks out. I'm sure you know the proverb in Japanese, the nail that sticks out will get hammered in.
Down.
So it was suggested to me that my efforts might be better employed elsewhere. And I said, yeah, okay, fine. So I decided to leave, and very, what's the right word? My English adjectives and adverbs get lost after so many years in Japan. With great timing, anyway. A friend of mine who I hadn't seen for a couple of years got in touch in the summer of that year when I was still working at the company. And he said, a friend of mine is making a record, and there's going to be one song in it which has English lyrics, and I'm wondering if you could help us out with the lyrics. So I said, yeah, sure. So his friend turned out to be Ryuichi Sakamoto.
Wow.
And YMO were already really big in Japan. They'd put out their second album, Solid State Survivor, which had several really big hit singles on it. I didn't like YMO in the early days. It was a bit too disco-ish for me. I just didn't get it. And I knew Hosono Haruomi from his solo work before that band, but I didn't know the names of the other two guys in the band. I just knew the image and I knew the group name. Mm-hmm. So when he said, this is Ryuichi Sakamoto, I didn't really register. So anyway, this was a solo album he was making in the middle of 1980. And I ended up helping out with the lyrics for this one song. And his manager called me up and said, we need to meet, discuss payment for your work. So I went to meet him, and the discussion about payment lasted about 30 seconds, I think. And he said, okay, there's one other thing I'd like to discuss with you. Would you like to come and work in our office? And it had just been decided that I was going to leave the company. And because I was on a 6-month visa at the time, if I didn't find a new job by the time my visa expired, I would have to leave. Mm-hmm. So I was getting a little bit anxious as well. So with absolute perfect timing, I found this new job. And I hadn't liked Yellow Magic Orchestra, but I was starting to find them interesting. They put out a new album just before he asked me if I wanted to work there. So I thought, okay, this might be interesting. And what he wanted me to do was the opposite of what I'd been doing in the other company, which was taking Western music, acquiring the rights to it, and exploiting the music in Japan. What he wanted me to do was take Japanese music and try to exploit the rights to it abroad. That didn't work well. In the 1980s, people in Europe and particularly in the US weren't ready for Japanese technopop. They just didn't get it at all.
Is this what we would call today as like city pop?
Not exactly, but not a million miles from it either. And any kind of Japanese music, people in the West just were not interested. So that side of my work didn't go well. On the other hand, once I was employed by that office, anything that required a knowledge of English came to my desk. So if the guys were making a new record and they sang exclusively in English, on their first 3 albums, they had worked with an English poet, I guess you'd call him, a guy called Chris Mosdell. And he would create these poems, I guess, and they would put music to them. And it was more spoken than sung, really. After 3 albums of that, they decided, okay, we want to write our own lyrics, but we've always done it in English. We want to continue doing it in English. So they needed somebody to translate what they could do into English. Here comes this new employee to the office. So say, okay, you can do it. And I say, wait. I don't have any ambitions at all to be a lyricist. They said, no, you can do it.
And especially poetry, probably not the easiest to start with.
It wasn't poetry. This was, they were writing their own lyrics, and I was translating them, kind of expanding them to some extent. It would just vary from song to song. But anyway, I ended up doing that sort of stuff, and basically anything that required a knowledge of English. So there would be interpreting, if, for example, Sakamoto, when doing a solo album, would work with David Sylvian from Japan or other Western musicians. If they came to Tokyo to work on the sessions, then I would be there to interpret.
So you had the opportunity to work with him directly?
Many times. I mean, I worked for their office for 5.5 years. When he did the film Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, that was shot in the Cook Islands in the South Pacific and a little bit in New Zealand. So I was like his dog's body. Normally he would have had his assistant in Tokyo. I mean, in Japan, his Japanese assistant would go with him wherever he went. But outside Japan, of course, that's not going to work. So it has to be somebody who can speak English. So I was his dog's body.
So you even participated or were on set for the filming of
every day, yes. Yeah,
what an experience.
I was actually in the film for about 2 seconds, and I'm the only one that knows where it is.
Now is not the time, but maybe later this year when Christmas comes around, I'll have to pay attention to see if I can spot you in there.
You won't find it.
With David Bowie as well?
Yes. I mean, the interesting thing about that movie was that in Rarotonga, the island where we shot it, at the time, it wasn't very developed. It's much more developed now, 40 years later, of course. At the time, there was only one proper hotel in the whole island. I mean, it's not a very big island. It's only 10,000 people, I think. So everyone from the whole, the crew and the stars and everybody were all staying at the same hotel. So you would see everybody in the hotel grounds just on a daily basis, including David Bowie and everybody.
And that experience working at this company kind of opened up new doors as well for you to then end up going into broadcasting.
Well, I'd already started doing radio. And in the new job, it was a very small company. It was only maybe 10, 12 people altogether. And the boss was only a couple of years older than me. And I said to him, look, I have this radio gig and I write reviews for magazines occasionally. Is there any problem with that? He said, no. As long as you're doing the work here in the office, to my satisfaction, any outside work you want to do, fine, just go for it. So the first radio show I had finished after 2 years. And right at that time, another artist that they were managing there, Yano Akiko, singer-songwriter, who was married to Sakamoto at the time as well. She was asked to DJ a radio show. And she was too busy to do it on her own. So he wanted someone to assist her. And he asked me if I would assist her.
Cool.
So the two of us did this show. It was a very, very late night show from 1982 to 1984. It was a 2-year thing. Towards the end of that time, she started making a new album and she needed to devote all of her time to that. So she actually stepped down from the show and I was doing it by myself. And what happened was that it was broadcast from 3 a.m. or something. It was really
like
graveyard shift. Yes, absolutely. One of the probably 5 or 6 people that was listening to the show happened to be developing an idea for a music video program on television, and they needed somebody to present it. And what I was doing on this very late night radio show was pretty freeform, and there were no limitations. Occasionally, I would be a little irreverent about the music or whatever, and I guess he liked that. And I got a call out of the blue saying, "Would you be interested in hosting a music TV show, a music video show on TV?" And originally, I said no because my experience with Japanese television had been that they didn't really treat the music very well. The sound was often not very good. They would only play the videos halfway through, and it was all very commercial. So I said, no, I'm not really interested. I'm doing radio and I'm fine with that. And then the woman who called said, well, they would really like to talk to you. Can you come in and talk to the director at least? And it happened that the TV station was only about 10, 15-minute walk from our office. So I said, yes, okay, I'll come and talk to him. So I went down there and they explained to me what they wanted to do, which was actually quite groundbreaking for TV in Japan in 1984. They said they were going to play all of the videos complete. It wouldn't fade any of them out. They would dub stereo sound from the records so that they all sounded good. They would give me some editorial control over what was played, and they wouldn't just play hits. They would make it much more music-oriented. And I thought, wow, if they're serious, then this could really be an interesting opportunity. So I said, well, if you really want me to do it, I've never worked in television. You may want to fire me after a couple of weeks, but I guess I've got nothing to lose. Maybe let's just give it a go.
Do I imagine this as something like MTV?
MTV had started in the US in 1981, I think. This was 3 years on from there, but it hadn't come to Japan yet. It did actually. It came, MTV itself started in Japan in I think it was a weekly show at the time, 6 months after we started our show. We started in the spring of '84. They started in the autumn, I think. So I started doing this show with a Japanese woman assisting me. And it was hard to begin with because if you've ever done television...
No, I have not.
Looking a television camera in the eye is the most unnatural thing in the world until you get used to it. Once you get used to it, you kind of imagine it's a person and it becomes okay. But to begin with, I would find myself kind of...
looking at the cameraman behind.
Or just looking somewhere, somebody in the studio, not at the camera itself. So that would look unnatural when somebody's watching TV. So I would see broadcasts of the show to begin with and think, oh no, I'm terrible,
Was it the live show or was it
No, it was pre-recorded. And they kept their word and we didn't play all hits. There was some fairly left field sort of selections as well. And what was interesting was that people watching the show weren't used to that. They were used to seeing just the hits and only the hits, because that's what all the other programs did. And we would get complaints a little bit. This is in the days when people still sent in postcards. And they would say, play more hits. And the producer, bless his heart, had said, whatever happens, I will make sure that this show runs for, at the very least, I think he said a year. Because a lot of shows in Japan, if they don't get ratings immediately, they can get cancelled after 3 months.
That's a very quick turnaround. It barely gives enough time to see if it catches on.
So the producer said he would guarantee us, I think it was a year. So by the time 6 months had gone by, people got used to the fact that they were being introduced to new music, and they started to find that pleasurable. And they were saying, yeah, go for it, play more. So our show started to get a bit of a reputation because we were playing music that nobody else was playing. And to have that freedom was wonderful. The show ran for, I think, 3.5 years.
Were you involved in the music selection process as well?
Yes, yeah. We used to have a long meeting every week. We had a very good assistant who would go around all of the record companies and pick up all the new release videos for that week and bring them to the station. We had a little meeting room where we'd go through every single video. And there would be arguments, fights even sometimes. I would say, no way am I playing that. And occasionally the producer would say, no, I'm going to insist. You're going to have to play this time. But I'm one of these people that if I don't like something, I'm not going to say I like it. And my face is going to tell you that I don't like it. So people would watch the show and they would actually enjoy the fact that I was having to introduce something that I couldn't stand.
And they visibly see you fuming inside the vinyl painting. So what makes an album or a song for you worthy to be played, that you enjoy, that you want to share with people? And on the other hand, maybe what makes you feel like, this one, I prefer to not?
If it's blatantly commercial, that turns me off. And it always has. I mean, even from the early days of the Beatles, there would be groups that were equally popular, but to me, they were just of no interest at all. And thinking back on it, it's because they were blatantly commercial and their heart wasn't in it or their soul wasn't in it. And I think people pick up on that. Even kids pick up on that. I don't think I'm particularly sensitive to those sort of things. But anyway, those were the sort of things that turned me off. Plus, there are certain kinds of music that I just don't like. I've never liked hard rock, heavy metal. I've never liked, with exceptions, disco.
Okay.
Because I grew up in the 1960s, and especially in the 1960s in London, when we had pirate radio. Pirate radio pioneered the broadcasting of soul music, which was something that the BBC didn't touch to begin with. And if anybody lived through their mid-teens, as I did in the mid-60s in London, and was listening to pirate radio, they became a soul music fan. I was a really, really big soul music fan. I got very much into blues and other black music as well. So that black feel, the rhythm, became almost like part of my body, I think. So when disco comes along in the mid-late 70s, and you have that very mechanical beat, it was just something that I couldn't take. It had to have that human kind of backbeat, or they're just very, very slightly kind of delayed, not delayed, but that very black feel to it. And that's just something that, because of when and where I grew up, that really, really influenced my taste in music.
So what was very popular in the mid-80s in Japan?
A lot of stuff that I didn't like. It was the days of so-called new wave. It was after punk. And a lot of it was, I mean, drum machines were starting to get used a lot. So a lot of the music didn't really appeal to me. There would be, okay, it was a music video show. So my criterion for whether we played something or not would generally be ideally, the video is really good, the visuals are good, and the song is good too. If that's not the case, then at least one of those has to be really good. If the video is so-so and the song is so-so, I'm not going to want to play it. If the video was really good and the song is something that I might not necessarily go for, then we play it. Okay, concrete example. New Order was a group that I never got into. It just didn't appeal to me, but they had an amazing video. I think there were a couple, actually. There was one, what was it called? Oh, God, I can't remember now. It was directed by Jonathan Demme, who went on to do the Stop Making Sense film for the Talking Heads. It was probably around the same time, actually. He'd done this film, and the camera, there were no edits. It was a long song. It was about 8 minutes long, I think, 7 or 8 minutes long. And the colors were all kind of pastel colors. It was really beautiful to look at. And there was no edit. The camera just moved very subtly throughout the 7 or 8 minutes. And it was a beautiful piece of filmmaking. I didn't like the song at all, but it was so well shot that we played it. And I think I probably said on air, I don't really like this song, but it's a beautiful video.
Have you been able to introduce songs that you really like to Japan and kind of help popularize them
a
little bit?
I mean, for people who were in their mid to late teens, in the mid-'80s, so those people, it's 40 years on now, people who are in their mid to late 50s perhaps now, their musical tastes, I discovered later, were very much influenced by what I was playing at that time. Although the show wasn't broadcast all over Japan. It was mainly in the Kanto area, and occasionally a particular station, a provincial station, would pick it up for 3 months, 6 months or whatever. So various little pockets of Japan, not in Osaka, where Mainichi Broadcasting, we were on TBS, and that's a partner with Mainichi Broadcasting. But MBS here in Osaka generally doesn't want to show TBS programs. So they never picked it up.
What's a typical production like for such a TV program? Is there like a typical routine you go into on a weekly basis to produce each show? How do I imagine this?
We would have a meeting, as I said, we'd go through all the videos, and we'd say, okay, we'll pick these, usually 7 or 8 songs in a show, and we put them into an order, and then somebody would write up a kind of script. And that was basically it. I mean, and then we'd all get together on the day of the shoot, and there'd be 3 cameras in the studio. There'd be makeup, of course, and we'd have a run through, and then just record each segment in turn.
Oh, okay. So
fairly
you
fairly
record,
simple.
you check that everything is okay, and then you can do the next one. And
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
During that time, were you able to continue your broadcasting, your radio as well, the DJing?
Yes. I did continue. The show that had led to the TV thing finished up just as the TV show was starting. And I did have another radio show on a news broadcasting service, which wasn't very well subscribed to at the time. So the show, I don't even remember very much about it, and it didn't last for an awfully long time. But shortly after that, I got asked to do a program for NHK FM, which meant going nationwide for the first time ever, actually. I'd been working with Sakamoto, and he had his own show on NHK FM. I'd interpreted for him several times when he had foreign guests on the show. So I'd been in the studios with him quite a bit. I'd also helped him out picking songs for his show, because I guess he just trusted my taste to some extent. So the director of his show was familiar with me, and he eventually stepped down from his show because there were other things he wanted to do. And the director said, well, maybe it's your turn now. So I said, great.
What an opportunity.
Yeah.
NHK, nationwide, your own show.
Yep. It was a short program to begin with. And the shows would change every year or a couple of years. But NHK kept me on with different programs until I think 1990. And I was off NHK 5 years. And I came back, I think, in 95, and I've been there ever since.
So you've experienced the burst of the bubble, so to say, in the early 90s.
Oh, yes. Oh, my God, yeah. At the height of the bubble in the late 80s, things were just totally, there was no logic to it at all. And I could feel it. A lot of people perhaps couldn't stand back from it. I don't know. Perhaps because I'm not Japanese, I always felt a little distance from it. And there was a feeling of this can't last. It's not real. And when eventually the bubble burst and the economy just plunged, I almost felt, oh, okay, this had to happen. The timing of it wasn't great because I just started my own company and I couldn't afford to pay myself any salary for about nearly a year, I think.
Oh, wow. That's a long time without a...
Yeah. So I was existing on. Obviously, I had a little money, but things were tough for a while. Yeah, it picked up again, but I had work. But by that time I had 2 children, so
So what kind of
expenses.
company had you established at the time?
It's a very, very small company. It was mainly for tax purposes anyway.
How has the media landscape changed when the bubble burst? Did you see any different kind of production cycles and the TVs maybe cutting down a little bit the channels on what they want to produce?
Yeah, I mean, sponsorship changed to an extent. So budgets obviously were reduced as well as a result of that. So the work was there, but the pay wasn't necessarily very good. Yeah.
Eventually, 2003, I believe, that's when you started Weekend Japanology.
It was Weekend
with
Japanology to begin
NHK.
with. Yes.
Maybe one of the programs that most people know you from
Outside
overseas.
Japan, absolutely, yes.
How did that get started? Did NHK reach out? Did you pitch the program?
They did. I was in NHK every week anyway, doing my radio program. And I'd done one-off TV things for NHK occasionally as well. And then a producer from NHK World, which is their foreign service, got in touch and said, we're launching a new program. We want a presenter for it. And he explained what it was going to be. I mean, it's pretty much what Japanology is now, just introducing different aspects of Japan to a foreign audience. Originally, when it was Weekend Japanology, it was a studio-based show in NHK. It would be shot in a studio, 2 presenters and a guest, and it was a 45-minute program with another little segment which was about something else, typical NHK programming. And it was available not on the internet to begin with. It was available via satellite, theoretically just about anywhere in the world. If you put up a satellite dish, you should have been able to pick it up. Who knew that? Who knew that NHK World even existed back in 2003? Hardly anybody.
Probably one of those programs you might see in like hotel rooms when you travel around Singapore, Hong Kong. And
yes, absolutely. The only people that were seeing it to begin with was absolutely that. It was people on business trips in international hotels, and the NHK World would be on the cable. So in 2005, along comes YouTube. And a few people who've seen the show and enjoy it start putting up episodes on YouTube just by themselves. And occasionally the NHK copyright people would find these and then take them down again, which was really frustrating. So gradually, even so, I mean, there were various people putting these episodes up on YouTube, and there wasn't any method to it, but there were quite a lot of them up there. And by this time, a lot of people around the world were starting to get interested in Japan through manga or anime, mainly those, and some other things as well. But they would get online and they do a search on Japan, I assume. And among the results that came up, they'd find maybe Japanology. Mm-hmm. And if it's on YouTube, they'd see an episode. And if they liked it, they'd start seeing a few more. I remember in 2010, my son had been at university in Portland, Oregon, and we went for his graduation in 2010. He went to get his hair cut in the morning, and my wife and I were outside the salon waiting for him to come out. And a couple of young guys walked past us, and one of them kind of looked at me and said, "Are you Peter Barakan?" I said,
"What a place to recognize him."
In Portland, Oregon, of all places. And this is a teenager, you know. I said, "Yes, but how do you know?" He said, "Well, in our high school, we have a Japanese class, and the teacher shows us Japanology videos." So I go, "Wow, finally."
That's so cool.
Somebody's actually watching this program. So that was very kind of not confirming, what's the word? Affirming, yeah.
So the program, Weekend Japanology, turned into Begin Japanology, and now is called as Japanology Plus.
That's right.
28-minute long episodes, right?
Yeah.
Of you presenting a topic on Japanese culture or meeting people that are living here in Japan and showcasing what they do.
Yes, that's pretty much, the
Can you
gist
tell
of
me
it.
a little bit about the production cycle? You've released so many episodes now. They come once a week when the season
We're
is
not
launched.
creating new ones once a week anymore. It's 24 a year at the moment.
Okay.
For a lot of years, we were doing it every single week, it could be tough actually at times. The choice of the themes is all NHK, apart from very, very occasionally I'll suggest something that they say, okay, yeah, let's do that. But 99% of the time, they're making the decisions on that. And then there'll be a group of directors, and each of them will take turns to put together a program. They will do research, find video material, also find a guest who's an expert on whatever it is we're talking about on that episode. And my bit is really, I'm a presenter. I don't have an awful lot to do with the actual putting together of the show. So we have a meeting the day before we shoot, and there's a script. We go through the script, and if I have stuff that I want to add into that, then they're willing to let me do that usually. And then the next day we go out, we do the shoot, I meet the guest, and we do our thing. We usually shoot quite a lot more material that can be put into a 28-minute program. So a lot of it gets cut out.
So it's usually a one-day shoot.
It's a one-day shoot, yes.
But you have to travel. You went to so many places, and
we go all over Japan. Yeah,
lots of logistics to organize.
Yeah. Sometimes they'll ask me to go in the day before, and we'll stay the night and start shooting very early in the morning if it's far away. If it's in Tokyo, then it's easy. It's just a day. The last week, was it? We did one. There's a little island off the peninsula of Nagoya. I forget what's the name of the peninsula. Anyway, Himakajima is the name of the island, and it's famous for octopus.
Okay.
So we did a show about octopus. And it takes a while to get there. So they asked me if I could stay over the night before, but I had something else to do. So I went out very early in the morning, and we shot for the day, and I came back in the evening. It was fine.
There's quite a lot on the body, all this traveling.
I mean, I'm 73 now, but I'm still fairly healthy. So as long as I get sleep, I'm fine.
So that's the other thing, right? This show started in 2003. It's
Yep.
still going on.
21 years, yeah.
21 years
It'll be
running
22
show.
years
That's
this year.
probably one of the longest running programs.
On NHK World, it may be the longest running show at the moment, yeah.
Do you have one episode or a couple episodes that really stuck with you where you're like, this was really something unique?
Oh. There's a lot. One of the few that I suggested something that I wanted to do was the last 6 or 7 years, twice a year, in addition to doing the regular half an hour episodes, we'll do a 50-minute special. And one of the ones we did, this is maybe 2 years ago now, we went to Amami Oshima, which is halfway between Kyushu and Okinawa. And there's a painter who's not well known, but who lived the last 20 years of his life in Amami and created absolutely amazing art there, called Tanaka Issan. And I'd been a fan of his painting for quite a while, and there's a gallery or museum devoted to his work in Amami, so I'd wanted to go there just for that, basically. And he died in the late 1970s, totally unknown, although he'd created this amazing work. And again, I'm losing the adjective.
By chance?
Well, it's almost by chance, but there's a better word. It'll come to me later. Anyway, several years later, a producer at NHK came across a suggestion for a program that hadn't been taken up at first about this guy. And he was reading the suggestion, and he said, this looks like it might be interesting. So they make a program for him, which was run on educational TV, on an art program. And overnight, it became almost like a sensation. And the program was rerun, and his paintings finally found an audience in Japan. Although even to this day, he's not a household name by any means. But anyway, I said, we have to go to Amami. I really want to do this because the work is just so great. And eventually they came around and said, yes, let's do it. So we went and we were there for a week and we did this 50-minute show, plus 2 regular Japanology programs as well. So that was a real sense of achievement having done that because I really wanted to do it so badly.
So for people interested that have maybe never watched, maybe a good place to start to see something you've been very passionate about creating.
Maybe, yes. We call these 50-minute programs Barakan Discovers whatever it is. So this one was Barakan Discovers Amami, I think.
How many people work on the actual filming on the...
It's not very many. There's the director, cameraman, sound guy, myself, and usually a producer will come because the show, of course, is in English. Most of the directors don't speak very good English. The producers do. The producers at NHK, in that department anyway, all speak pretty good English.
Mm-hmm.
So the producer will come just to make sure that everything's going okay. So producer, director, cameraman, sound guy, and myself, that's it, 5 usually, and a driver if we're in a location bus.
Do you still have some episodes that you want to do, things that you want to discover here in Japan after so many years of going into so many deep topics?
Occasionally there'll be things that I want to do. Sometimes the producers don't think that they would really expand into a whole show. They might find them too, what's the word? Kind of minute. Yeah.
Too narrow, too niche.
Yeah, niche. Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
So there are things still for you to do and discover after that many years.
Oh, I'm sure there always will be. Yeah, there's so much to discover. I mean, I've been here 50 years and, I would like to do more shows that are not about any one particular thing, perhaps, but more cultural or historical even, because after 50 years living here, I still don't know an awful lot about Japanese history. It's not a thing that I really studied. Even when I was in college, there was a history textbook, but it was very dry and boring. A friend of mine, an English friend of mine who I've known for many years now, Leslie Downer, who's written many books about Japan, she wrote The Shortest History of Japan, which was published in England last year. And that was really good for anybody that wants to get a handle on Japanese history with one not particularly thick book. It's just regular size.
I may want to give this one a try. I just finished reading the book Shogun from Sadler about the history of Tokugawa Ieyasu, but it's so detailed and so many. It's kind of, if you have no strong background in anything, it's kind of confusing to read.
It really does get confusing, yeah. I really recommend Leslie's book. But to take a book like that and maybe try to serialize it for foreign consumption I think would be a really great idea. Whether NHK would go for that, I don't know. I'd also like to take on cultural issues. There are topics which people don't talk about on television generally because there are taboos associated with them. Being non-Japanese, it's an issue that doesn't worry me. These things you need to talk about so that people understand Japan more deeply.
What are some of these taboos or restrictions on Japanese television that you've seen where you can't really talk about certain social issues, but you personally think it would be important to bring up?
Cultural things like prejudice, class prejudice, and things like this. I mean, I don't want to go into it in detail here. But there are things which people just will always avoid on Japanese television. And these things, okay, you don't want to really focus on them because then there's the possibility of making it flare up again, where people think it's really kind of swept under the carpet now. But these issues still do persist. And I think, people need to know that if they want to know more about Japanese society.
What do you feel, having worked in media for so long, are still today some of the biggest misconceptions about Japan that maybe foreigners have when coming here, especially now with the number of tourists growing, the number of people that want to immigrate here also growing? What are the main misconceptions?
Ooh. I mean, Japan still is very, very different. It isn't like the West. And people come here thinking that they can get by with Western attitudes. If you're a visitor who's here for a week, 2 weeks, then yes, you can do that. But a lot of people act in a way that Japanese find offensive, and it can easily influence their attitudes about Westerners in general, which I always think is a terrible shame. I think Westerners can still be a little bit arrogant, and they think they're better or superior in some way to the Japanese. Maybe they don't realize it, but you get it in their attitude sometimes. And obviously, it's not everybody. It may be just a few, but I always feel it's a terrible shame. And a little humility goes a long way, I think.
Do you also feel that perhaps the way Japanese media wants to portray Japan to foreigners is kind of giving sometimes not the image of what it actually is when people are here?
Right. Very much so. Japanese people they're not used to dealing with Westerners in general, I think. And I mean, even in Japanology in the early days, they would give me a script, and there would be things in the script. I said, I cannot say this. This is borderline nationalism. If I say something like this, it's not going to sound natural for a start. And it's just, there's no way I can say that. And we would actually have disagreements on the set once in a while.
So they would still ask you to...
This would be in the very, very early days. But I impressed upon them that if you want to come across to a Western audience with any kind of authenticity, you've got to be honest with them, and you can't be handing out propaganda. It's just not going to work. And especially if you use somebody like me on the show, if you want to do that, then you need to get somebody else. But so many times you'll find that, I mean, for example, I have this bee in my bonnet about the English language announcements on the train. It's a very minor thing, perhaps, but you listen to them and you know that a Japanese person has taken a Japanese script and translated it into English, and then they've said to the person that's narrating it, okay, you have to do it, and I want to hear the smile. And I think, I don't know if I pick up on that more than other people do, but I find it so annoying.
Well, we were talking on the podcast as well, and just before recording that, Donna Burke, who does the voice of the Shinkansen announcement, was talking about something similar as well, right? The script is set, you have to do as it is, and there's little room for change, even though maybe as a foreigner in this matter, we would have more expertise about how to convey the message to a foreign audience.
I mean, very often the script itself is grammatically odd. It's not mistaken as such, but no native English speaker would ever say that. And in addition to that, I mean, Donna's okay, she's a native speaker, but if you go into the Tokyo local trains, usually the intonation is bad, the script itself is non-grammatical, everything about it is just hideous. And if they want to give a good impression to foreigners, they really need to work on things like that, which are they might be very minor things, but I think they really influence somebody's impression of a culture.
The media landscape in the West, especially maybe with a 24-hour news cycle and so on, is changing very fast, is evolving very fast, and adopting new technologies with the impact of social media as well. How has it been in Japan in your experience, having worked both broadcasting, live television, TV programs for NHK, one of the biggest national producers? What kind of changes have you noticed over the last few decades of you working in that industry?
I've worked not very much in television recently, apart from Japanology. And like probably many people around the world now, I watch very little television. I don't find it stimulating. I find it's very dumbed down in a lot of cases. So I'm probably not the best person to ask about TV. Radio, I'm a music guy, and most of my radio is music programs. Luckily, The two major stations that I work for allow me to have complete control over the music I want to play. So I don't have any complaints about that. Unfortunately, there's much, much less foreign music being played on the radio in Japan than there was, say, 30 years ago.
Interesting.
It's become almost all J-pop.
What is the reason for this change?
The way I see it, when I first came here in the mid-70s, a lot of Japanese musicians were being influenced by Western music, but Western music started to come into Japan in real time in the early 70s. And people were starting to want to copy it. And because Japanese are, most of them study music in school, a lot of them read music, so they can learn things quite efficiently. But the rhythm was not good to begin with, which was, only to be expected because people had only been listening to this stuff for probably 3-4 years. And the drummers just didn't have the feel. I never got it. So by the time the late 80s come along, they've had 15 years working on this music. There's a whole generation of musicians who've grown up listening to Western music, have a much better feel for it. And they sound a lot more convincing. Being Japanese, they write their lyrics in Japanese and they sing in Japanese. And an audience that up until then had been listening to Western music and enjoying it but not understanding what was being sung, have a whole different option now of listening to music that sounds as authentic, perhaps. To me, not necessarily, but to a lot of people it would. Musically, it would sound more authentic. And it's sung in Japanese, so they understand what's being sung. Obviously, to young Japanese people, that's going to be much more attractive. It started getting ratings on the radio, and as soon as that happened, all of the radio stations started playing nothing but that. And a lot of great Western music, which had been on the air up until then, just got pushed out progressively to the point where you hear really, really little now.
So luckily you have your show, Barakan Beat, on Enter FM, right?
Yep.
Where you have complete control.
Yep.
So what kind of music do you like to play on your show?
It's pretty broad-based. I get a lot of requests on the Enter FM program. And because I get so many, I tend to think, okay, well, I probably should play this. I only play requests if it's something that I would have played anyway. So that works out fine. There's a lot of old music as well, because there's a lot of great old music which is not getting played anywhere, probably. Even in the West, obviously pop radio is going to deal mainly with what's current now. And there's an amazing musical culture which you can get online, of course, but if you don't know it exists, you're maybe not going to go and search it out. So, I mean, if people request stuff from the 1970s, for example, or even going back further, I think, oh, that's a great song. I haven't played that for a while. Then sure, I'll fit that in. From the point of view of genre, there's, oh God, anything from folk music to jazz, rock, of course, soul, blues, African music, Latin music, Asian music.
How do you structure your show? How do you choose today I'm going to go with this playlist and organize? Is it all improvised? However you feel?
It's not totally improvised. Because I only have 2 hours on a Sunday evening, it's live. And because the station doesn't have a great library, I bring all of the music from home. So I'll put the playlist together before leaving the house. And unless something drastic happens between then and the time we go on the air, I'll play the playlist in that order. What I say about it, I don't write a script or anything. It's all ad-libbed. But I do have a song order there.
Because for me, I don't listen to radio too much anymore, but growing up always, all the programs, usually 1 hour-ish, I always wondered how do the hosts, the DJs kind of make their selection and know what to play. And as you were saying, most mainstream radio stations now just play whatever hits are out there because that's what made people tune in.
And most of the DJs now worldwide, I think, don't have, they're not allowed to pick their own songs. There's one music director for the whole station who will program all of the stations, and it'll be a fairly tight playlist, and the DJs just do the links between the songs a lot of the time, with some exceptions, but most of the time I think that's what you'll find. So I really feel lucky that both NHK and Inter FM will let me play whatever I want to play.
So what are some of these maybe lesser known artists or forgotten artists that you would like to introduce? If you could share maybe a couple of names or albums.
Oh my God.
I put you on the spot there.
So many. Okay. Just this week, an album from about 35 years ago, which has been one of my favorite records ever since it came out, finally got released on vinyl. The guy who made the album died last year. He was in his early to mid 60s, I think. He's from Mali in West Africa. His name is Toumani Diabaté, and he plays the kora, which is like an West African harp kind of instrument. The guy is a genius, or was a genius. He's dead now. And it's a solo album, just him playing by himself, nobody else on it at all. If you didn't know, and you listen to this album, you would think there were 2, maybe 3 people playing together. It's all him with no overdubs. And it's just sublime, the whole album. It's called Kaira, Kaira.
Kaira. I'll check that one out for sure after we finish recording.
It was released only on CD to begin with, I think. It's been on all the streaming platforms for a while now, but I'd wanted to have it on vinyl, and I just thought, oh, well, it's never been available on vinyl. And I just happened to see in a magazine the other day that had just been reissued. Great. So,
adding to the collection.
Yeah, I think it's actually today, because I pre-ordered it on Amazon yesterday, and they said I think it was coming out today. So,
how do you find all these kind of niche songs, niche artists for your show?
With that one, I had a relationship with, there's an American record producer who's been living in London since the mid-60s called Joe Boyd. And he had a very small label, which he started in the early 80s, called Hannibal. I would go to, there's a music industry get-together in Cannes in France every January called Midem, where record companies and music publishers get together and they do deals. I just started working for Yellow Magic Orchestra's office, and I went to this place to see if I could meet people to do some deals. And right outside the main venue there in Cannes, I happened to be just standing there. And this guy comes up to me, and everybody has a badge. It has your name and your company name, and I think the country you're registered from. So it had my name and Japan. He said, oh, you're from Japan. I'm looking for somebody in Japan to be my sub-publisher. Mm-hmm. I looked at his badge, and it was Joe Boyd. And I knew Joe Boyd as a record producer because he had produced all the records by a folk rock group called Fairport Convention. And a friend of mine from school had been the original drummer in the group. So I was a fan of theirs because of that. And I knew Joe's name as their producer. He also produced people like the Incredible String Band, who were it was niche, but very popular as well in the late 1960s. And he'd done a bunch of other things as well. So anyway, I said, oh, you're Joe Boyd. I know who you are. And we did a deal. So I was representing his publishing in Japan. And he would send me all of the new releases on his label. And that was one of them.
What a way to kind of find these. Nowadays, everyone's looking on Spotify, but it's hard to find.
The word that I'd forgotten just now, and I've just remembered it, serendipitous.
Serendipitous.
It's one of those things, you meet these people and it was meant to be.
You have all this vast knowledge of music and you share it here on a Japanese radio station, while most others are sharing mostly Japanese hits. What kind of audience interaction do you get? Do you have this kind of niche fan base that is interested in this international?
It's very niche, I'm sure. I've never been overly concerned with how many people listen to the shows. On radio, they're never really quite sure. They do ratings, but I'm never quite sure how accurate the ratings are anyway. And the way I see it is that as long as the radio station keeps employing me, they're paying me the same amount, whether there's 10 people listening to it or 10 million people listening to it. Why should I worry? So I'm sure that my audience is fairly limited. Having said that, I have this other show on NHK on Saturday mornings, and that's been running for 25 years now. We're in, I think, actually 26 as of this March. And although it's probably a limited audience, it's nationwide. So whenever I go to do events anywhere in Japan, people will always come up and say, I listen to your show on NHK every week. And it's, it's very gratifying when people say that.
It must be a nice feeling to have people.
It definitely is. So, I mean, it's actually very comfortable for me because I ride the trains every day. Nobody ever hassles me because I'm not on television very much, and because Japanology is not really seen by very many people in Japan, probably nobody knows who I am, and that's fine. It's I no problem with like signing autographs, or if somebody says, "Oh, I really enjoy your work," then fine, that's great. But when I was working for Yellow Magic Orchestra, Ryuichi couldn't walk the streets. He had to go everywhere by car. Very often he'd be wearing a hat and sunglasses, to try and be, what's the word?
To hide himself from the paparazzi.
Anonymous.
Yeah.
But you can't do it. People immediately, they know who you are when you're that famous. And just seeing that from close up was a real lesson in, okay, I mean, I'm doing radio, and when I started doing TV, I thought, I do not want to be famous, not mega famous anyway. Only one time I had an experience which scared me a little bit. When Tokyo Dome opened, it must have been the mid-'80s, one of the very early shows they had, there was Sting. And Sting had really good videos. He had some very good directors working with him. We used to play Sting's videos a lot on our show. So I went to see the gig, and it's a baseball stadium, right? So there's tons of people there. And I knew that as soon as it finished, there'd be a mass exit, and didn't want to get stuck in that, getting the train home. So I left halfway through the encore, just to get out a minute or so early. And I was walking towards the train station, and a couple of people came up and said, "Oh, I watch your show every week. Can you sign this for me?" And so I said, "Yeah, sure." And I sat down, and I was signing whatever it was they gave me. And some other people walked by, and they saw that and said, "Oh, can you sign mine as well?" And gradually this whole
crowd grew.
And I got actually kind of squashed in. There was probably a couple of hundred people.
Wow.
Yeah. And I thought, oh my God, this is what happens, to people who are really popular. And that's the only time it ever happened to me. But I thought, okay, I really don't want this to happen again.
How is radio changing with the release of platforms like Spotify, Deezer, or live streaming as well, where people can on Twitch or something like this?
Yep. A lot of people listen to podcasts now, of course, in Japan as well as anywhere else. Less people listening to radio, unless they get turned on to it for some reason. Radio has these little blips where people kind of get turned on to it again, usually if there's been some major mishap or a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
And people find it comforting, I think, just to have some sound on that they can pay attention to if they want to, and maybe not if they don't want to, but they just find it comforting. When life is just back to normal, people perhaps don't listen to the radio so much. In places like America, where everybody's driving in their cars all the time, I think people still listen more to radio, but it might be more like satellite radio now, which is much more kind of narrowcasting. People occasionally ask me about what the future holds for radio, and quite honestly, I don't know. You've got AI now. Somebody the other day, I was talking to them, and they were fiddling with their phone while I was talking to them. They said, I just asked ChatGPT, make up a playlist that Peter Barakan would play. And it came out with it in like seconds. There was 10 songs, and all of them were things that I would possibly play on a show. But there were some things that they definitely left out that, I would want to be in there. But AI can get fairly close in that kind of, several seconds. So I don't know. AI is, getting more complex by leaps and bounds. faster than we can really notice it, I think. A year from now, 2 years from now, will I still be able to make radio programs? I do not know. I hope so.
51 years in Japan. What were some of the biggest changes that you didn't expect?
Biggest changes I didn't expect. No one expects the Spanish Inquisition.
Until it's there.
Until it's there, yeah. That's a good question. I don't know how easy that would be to answer. 3/11, I suppose, for one. 9/11 for another one. Didn't see those coming. 9/11 changed an awful lot. Also, the Omushindikyo sarin
gas
incident.
attack in Tokyo.
That's 30 years ago. It'll be 30 years in March, I think. That changed things a lot here. And those things, of course, stop being news after a while, but they have subtle changes on the way people live their lives. And those things last for decades.
If you've seen the before and you see the after, you can notice the differences. But for people arriving today, they may not know why.
Exactly. They may not even know. I mean, if people are in their 30s, they perhaps don't even know that happened. Quite naturally, it's not in the news all the time. But yes, I mean, societies get changed by these things. And of course, societies change anyway for all sorts of reasons, for better and for worse. Japan, because it lost Second World War to America, has been extremely heavily influenced by America for the last 80 years. And whoever's in power in America wields enormous influence over Japan. I can only hope that the next 4 years don't turn out to be something that we all regret.
What are things that you want to do in the next few years? You said you were not so sure if you would be able to continue radio
well, I'm not going to spend my life worrying about that. I really don't know how it's going to pan out, but I'm at the age where I continue doing what I do because I enjoy doing it, because the broadcasting stations allow me to do it. And until that comes to an end for some reason, I should just keep on doing it because it's what I love. And although my schedule can be demanding at times, as long as I get 6 hours sleep, maybe 7 at night, I'm fine. And I just enjoy doing it so much. There's very little stress.
So if someone were to arrive in Japan today and look back at your career and be like, oh, I want to have a career like Peter Barakan in Japan, work in broadcasting, work on TV, in today's Japan, what advice would you want to give them?
Learn Japanese, first of all. I mean, not even just for broadcasting, but if you want to spend serious time in Japan, you need to be able to understand the culture, and you need to be able to communicate with the people, earn their trust, all those sorts of things. You need to be able to understand the language. To learn to read and write after you've become an adult requires serious, concentrated time, which is not easy if you're in the workforce already. But at the very least, you do need to get a handle on the language. That's absolutely, necessary.
And if the language is something you have already accomplished, how to break into this industry in Japan today? How different is it from when you arrived?
Oh, God. Very different. Depends what you want to do as well. I mean, if you want to do what I'm doing, you need to earn the trust of the producers making the programs to get to the point where they're going to ask you to do it. I mean, maybe some people are better at selling themselves. I don't know. I never was. I was lucky enough that people would come to me and ask me to do things. For the kind of radio I'm doing, I would say forget it. I don't think it's going to happen. Unless you're incredibly lucky. As I said, I've been doing it for 45 years now. Perhaps because I got into this when it wasn't quite such a difficult market. I've just been able to hang on to it. I don't think it would be easy now. I really don't.
Times have changed.
Yeah, but on the other hand, it's not just radio now. There's the internet, there's YouTube, there's podcasts, and lots of people are doing that. So I think the future for young people now probably isn't even in the mainstream media. And let's face it, the mainstream media may not be the mainstream for very long now. You see so many articles now about how what was regarded as kind of niche media, things like in the West, things like Substack, for example. So many people are writing on Substack now and becoming very successful at it, and getting bigger audiences than some of the major newspapers. And again, people are watching much more YouTube than they are television. So maybe television isn't even where people want to go anymore. I don't know.
So learn the language if you want to live in Japan regardless, and then be open to however the media landscape change and adapt.
Absolutely. I mean, you adapt to anything and everything anyway. I mean, I think that's one of the first rules of life is that you have to be adaptable. It's sort of sink or swim.
Peter Barakan, thank you so much for coming and sharing your time with us today. Thank you for sharing so many stories of your life here in Japan. It was a very fascinating conversation.
Well, thank you. I hope they're of interest to someone other than myself.
Thank you everyone for listening and watching. This was Unpacking Japan, and we'll be back again next week. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on future conversations. And we'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comment section down below. And if you enjoyed this episode, here are a couple more that we think you'll enjoy. Thanks again for your support, and we'll see you next time.